I want to welcome Tessa Bunney to the sofa here at the Martin Parr Foundation. We're currently showing your work made out of orchards, and behind us you'll see some of the many apple varieties that you photographed when you were doing that project. But I want to go back in the first instance, and when do you think you got an interest in photography? Was it before you went to college or while you were there?
Well, so I think I've been interested since I was a teenager. I was a bit of a sad case, I suppose. When I was like 13, 14, I used to cycle around my village photographing sheep and bits of old wood and things like that. So, I had an Instamatic camera, very basic thing when I was little, because I think it kind of stemmed from the fact that my dad was interested in photography as well, and then I never stopped, and I think I did a work experience when I was 16 at school in the Meat Research Institute in Langford, and I went and photographed like carcasses and horrible, disgusting diseases and cider. I have no idea why I still wanted to be a photographer. It was a very boring kind of job, a lot of cataloguing of things and printing in the darkroom, which I liked the printing, but so I kind of got an idea of one kind of photography from that. That was when you had to choose what you wanted to do at school, so I just
So did you do photography at A-level then?
No, I did. There was in my school. I changed school to do A-level textiles because I was interested in that, and they also did O-level photography for sixth formers. So I didn't do A-level, but I did do O-level, and that was the teacher was a really supportive, really lovely man, and we had darkroom and everything at school. So I did that.
And back in those days, did you actually see particular photographers? Did you see books and such like?
Yeah,
photographers that you liked?
Yeah, I remember from those days Cartier-Bresson and things like that, but I think the interest in specific photographers and working photographers and things came when I went to Farnham. I did luckily for me, because I didn't study art and you had to do a foundation course, I went to Filton in Bristol. And you could decide what you wanted to do before you went. So I did a foundation course in photography. So of course, there wasn't any theory really involved with that, but it was more getting your portfolio ready. So there was a few lucky coincidences of where I grew up, really. Having been born in Bristol and then going to school around here and everything, I was lucky in that respect.
And did you think you really came into your own while you were at Farnham? I mean, you were surrounded by people doing photography, you were living photography.
Yeah, I guess I did. I did fall in love more with photography, and I realised, there's, a lot more to it than I kind of went in a bit naively, really, not really knowing what kind of photography I wanted to do or anything. But I think that, yeah, definitely, but I don't think I really knew what I wanted to photograph till some years later. I kind of went through the whole process and I came out with a degree, but I'm not really sure that I...
Out of interest, what was your final degree show?
I worked with a community group in a woodland between Southampton and Portsmouth, and there was photographed the community and the usage of the woodlands and conservation projects and the people involved with that. But it was pretty... there was some images, but I wouldn't really show anyone them now.
Okay. And what about would you drag out your pictures you took when you were a teenager? Are they interesting?
They are, I quite like them because I've put them in a kind of classic photo album with the plastic over them, and I've handwritten all the titles, and I did pull out one the other day because it was not the other day, some time ago, and it was the caption I'd given it was somewhere in England. and it was taken from a bus on a school trip, and it's a terrible picture, but I quite like the fact that I've kept them in their original format. And the other thing as well was I once went on holiday to Cornwall, which is where my family come from, and I took loads of pictures of dogs, and I sent them into Blue Peter and got a badge.
Oh, well done.
For my pictures of dogs I met on holiday. So I feel that's one of my major achievements. I've still got the letter. It's all hand typed because obviously it was a long time ago.
I've never met a photographer that's actually managed to attain a Blue Peter badge.
Oh,
so
really?
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So I guess when we look at your whole career, I mean, you're really best known for photographing rural crafts, things that are dying out. How did you sort of stumble upon that as being your main project?
I think I'm trying to think what I did for the years after I left college. I kind of had a few jobs and things to make a living. I worked in a picture library and I worked as a technician and things. And then I moved to Yorkshire to work for the Archaeological Trust as a staff photographer. And then after that, I didn't really like the job. And then I just went freelance. And then I moved out of York itself into the North York Moors. And I think that was partly because I wanted to work with like food producers, and I started that in 1999, small food producers around where I live basically, and it was something I could do that was like cheap for me to kind of do because I didn't have to travel. I couldn't, afford to do a big project overseas or anything, so I decided to look at what was around me, and that's when I started working with the hill farmers. And I suppose that's another lucky break for me was getting a grant to work with do a project about hill farming on the North York Moors, which was exhibited at Impressions Gallery in 2000, I think, and I call that my big break, really. It was just like there was a project available to work with communities or people or something in Yorkshire. So it's about finding the opportunities that fit what you want to do, and I mean that still applies today. Like I don't apply for loads of things, only if they really fit with what I actually want to do, not try to do something I don't want to do, if you see what I mean. So I think that was what the start of the whole rural thing properly.
And one of the things you do when you make these rural projects, you obviously get to know the people very well and build up a relationship of trust. I guess you take photos back. You don't just go once, you go a few more times. Has that really been part of your formula of how you do this work?
Yeah, sometimes it can be. I mean, even just like last week, I went to Farndale Show and I spent ages chatting to the farmers that I worked with 22 years ago on that project that was shown at Impressions. Like they all completely remember you, even though, I mean, I might have seen them a handful of times at various places or not, but they all remember your name and who you are and things, so they're always really friendly and things. So I think that's part of it. That's what I really like about what I do.
And as well as the farmers, I guess one of the big subjects you've also addressed is the whole fishing community and different ways of doing fishing. Many of these methods are dying out. Yeah. Tell us a bit about some of the ones that you photographed that maybe don't exist any longer.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent the last few years working in Morecambe Bay, and I kind of went into that because by chance, again, like as things, I was interested in. I did something about flower farming and foraging, and the foraging went on into Morecambe Bay, and I met the shrimpers that I ended up working with for 2 or 3 years, and and so what I hadn't really realised is how on the edge it was. I mean, I've heard a lot about the fishing industry and things like that, but I didn't really know any fishermen. So some of those things, I mean, for various reasons, the fishermen retire, and then, one of them's retired recently, and then that kind of fishing that they were kind of the last people to use a particular type of net to catch whitebait. But it's kind of to do with the environment and the changes in fish. I mean, when you talk to the fishermen, they'll tell you, years ago there were loads of salmon, and then that's been stopped, and then the cockle beds where I spent a lot of the last couple of years have been closed. They were closed this year's season, and now I've just found out that they're supposed to open on the 1st of September, and they're not opening them again. So it's not like gone, but it's temporarily gone, and they then have to move on to something else. And so it's the adaptability that I kind of find really fascinating. Right, okay, we can't cockle now, so we're going to go back and try and make a living with shrimping or whatever it is. But there are a lot of, and also there's a type of fishing called have netting, and they've hardly caught any sea trout they catch with that now, and they don't know whether they're going to get licenses next year or not. So it's like from one year to the next, and I suppose that's part of the.
So as well as doing the work here in the United Kingdom, you've also done work in Kenya, Vietnam. How on earth do you go to a place like that and get the same kind of relationship, which is so key to what you do here, in a foreign country where you don't speak the language?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I used a translator was in Romania, and I went to Romania because I was interested in the shepherding and things like that, and I realised quite soon after I got there, it probably wasn't that safe to be walking around, like the countryside and things like that. I had a few incidents with like drunk men and things like that. So I ended up using a translator, and it was really difficult to get over the whole thing about my work is me and my conversations and my relationship with the people. So then to have to use a translator was really different. But then when I went to Vietnam, I straight went in there and found a translator that I had two actually, and both of them came from the countryside, and they knew how it worked, and they were quite like, I can remember Vung, who was the man translator, had a female one and a male one. I worked with them at different times, and he said, before we go and do what you're asking to do, which was to work with the craft villages, I want to show you the rice fields and where it started, how it works, and the reasons why these craft villages are springing up. But it was really different, because I just basically let him, after the first few times where they would ask me what I was doing and why I was there and everything, he knew the answers to their questions. So really he just talked to them, and I just took pictures, and it was kind of really different. And I did that for a few years. But then when I came back to the UK, it was like, it's like I had to get back to my old way of working, which was to drive myself, go by myself, no assistance or anything, and just begin my way that I prefer to work, which is obviously communicating directly. But I really don't know how the work comes out the same. I mean, in Kenya, people do speak a bit of English, but I went to the rose farm and contacted them directly and just said, can I come and photograph them? And they're British, the people that own it, and they just said, yeah, just come and we'll give you a translator that'll go around with you and spend a week in the farm. And they organised a cheap hotel and picked me up on the work bus every day. And the only thing that she did, she said, Tessa, you will see what you're going to see, and we just trust in you. Like, with not everything I saw or that I'm bound to see in a situation like that is something I want to share. So really they just took a punt that I was okay. Mm-hmm. And I find that really quite amazing, because, that business that they're in is very controversial, especially in Kenya, with all the water situation. They have to use chemicals and things, but what they're doing, they're using local people. Nearly everybody walks to work. They're giving people work where their farms have got so small because they keep getting split within the families, and the droughts and things.
And when they saw the pictures, did they appreciate them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy that came around with me, he was quite interested in doing photography, and I think he was interested to see how I worked. I set up a little studio, photographed the flowers. He was there. And I left all my backdrops for him to use and things. So, I think it was good for them to see how I worked, and I don't know what they're doing now for photography and things. I think he does a bit of it and things. So,
and then coming back to the UK, I assume you take back prints to people as you go along, and as you make another visit.
Yeah, I do.
And do they generally speaking, like the images?
Yeah, I think sometimes you're not really sure. I mean, I take a massive variety of pictures, and sometimes it's difficult because, I take things that I think that they would like, and then I get a bit sidetracked, making sure that there's some there that they will like. But
like people smiling?
Yeah, I mean, people smiling, I wouldn't use generally that, but if I've got them, if I see it, I take it and then give it to them. Yep. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I probably give them a bigger edit than I would ever use. But sometimes they really love them. I mean, the other day, a fisherman bought 3 prints from me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, that was really amazing. I gave him the prints of himself, but he wanted some landscape pictures. So, you know, it is a bit tricky because people's idea or perception of what's a good photograph is different. But having said that, the exhibition at Morecambe Bay, the first thing that happened was the authorities came and checked it out and gave it a big tick. I'd got one of the fishermen to go through all my text and everything to make sure that it was all in order. There wasn't anything a bit kind of controversial or anything. And then lots of the families came and I got some really nice messages back. So I think it went well within the community generally. So that's important.
So we wanted to commission someone to do something about this whole cider industry here in Somerset, and you were the natural choice. How do you go about starting a project like that, which is much bigger than, say, one particular small group of fishermen?
I suppose I have to trust my instincts a bit these days. You know, I kind of panicked a little bit, and you know, I looked on the internet. So I suppose I grew up in the cider area, so I knew some of the cider makers, but then I wanted to go wider than that. I'd worked with the Temperleys before on a commercial job for Piper's Crisps, so I knew them as well. But I wanted to try and find the kind of small artisan ones, and so I just looked on the internet really and just found a massive list. And by chance, I think there's a lot of luck involved sometimes in my choices. I found the first person I went to see was Roger Wilkins, and you know, he's renowned for being a character in it, you know, in himself. So I suppose I was pretty lucky. And then obviously I was staying in the area and stuff, and sometimes I'd drive past the signs with all the, you know, cider signs, and I'd go down and see them. And they were probably the more interesting ones than the ones that, you know, a big internet presence. You know, like Roger's website says, don't bother to email me, just come and I think it was just ring me at dinner time or something like that, you know, and if you're lucky, you'll get me. So that kind of automatically piqued my interest. Anyone that says that in this day and age has got to be interesting. So.
And doesn't he sell cheese as well?
Yeah, I think he works with a local cheesemaker, yeah. And in the past, you could go there and have cheese and biscuits or cheese and bread and stuff like that. But I think he got so popular, as with his wassail as well, that, you know, you just can't cope because it's a tiny road to get to, down a dead-end road in the middle of, you know, rural Somerset.
So thinking about the future, I mean, you're almost going to run out of these sort of different rural crafts because they're all dying or disappearing. What do you see yourself doing? Do you see yourself really chasing the last ones, or are you going to go on and do something a bit different?
I don't really know. I mean, things tend to just drift on from one thing to the next, really. I don't feel like I've done it yet, and I don't feel I'm bored of it yet, and I'm still passionate about their cause, if you know what I mean. There's so many things going on. Like in Fleetwood, there's a lot of problems. There's 3 fishermen left, you know, the big port, you know, there's 3 fishermen left, and they were gifted it by Queen Victoria, the harbour. And there's a big campaign going on about that because they want to move them off to renovate it, and then they think they'll never be able to go back. So that's part of the story that's going on over there, which is on the very edge of Morecambe Bay.
And that's going to be commissioned by the museum in Fleetwood?
Yeah, so hopefully that's all a bit secret. But anyway, It's not now.
Mum's word.
Yeah. So it's not. I spoke to them yesterday, and it's just about getting the fishermen on board.
Well, obviously you're going to be backing their cause. I think they'd welcome it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's difficult sometimes. People do, you know, in Morecambe Bay, people aren't out on fishing boats. It's a different kind of fishing. It's from on the sand. But then once you start going out on fishing boats, it's more risky, I suppose. And also, you know, there's this thing about women on fishing boats. I mean, although you know, there's a lot of joking about the fishing boats I've been on, but actually they did still catch fish when I was there. And everyone was still alive when we got back. So I don't think I brought too much bad luck, but
that's
there is a
interesting.
bit of that going on.
They still sort of believe that. And did you ever meet any female fishermen or fisherwoman?
Yeah, I did in Morecambe Bay. There was Margaret Owen, who was in her 60s. She just had her 70th birthday. So she was a fisherman that did have netting in the river, and also like the white baiting with her husband. And in the past, she's done a lot of cockling and mussling and all the different types of fishing.
But not out on a boat?
No, but there are fisherwomen or fishermen. They like to be called fishermen as well. There's one in Norfolk that's really well known, and she does a lot of social media and stuff. She works on a boat that gets whelks and crabs and lobsters and stuff. So, but she's not. She just fell in love with the sea. I think she went out on a fishing trip on holiday or something. So that it does happen. You know, people, they do. You know, it's always thought of that it goes down through the generations, but sometimes it can be that you just want to be a fisherman, and luckily there seems to be some opportunities for people to do that still.
Thank you, Tessa, for opening up about your work and everything, and we look forward to seeing the new set of pictures. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin.